Hey, Joe. Hope you're doing well, man. Um, uh, it was great to hear about the dog. That was fantastic. We have animals here. We have animal sagas. We have animal drama, and I want to tell you about that, but not right now. We have more important things to discuss. So anyway, this video is the long-awaited Baroque lute video. The thing about the lute is the lute world is an abyss of specificity. I don't know if I don't know if that's what you were talking about when you were talking about the laughable conservatism. That might be part of what you mean. While the abyss of specificity that exists in the lute world seems from the outsider to be fussiness and maybe a marketing ploy to get you to buy as many lutes as possible. There are actually reasons behind it. There is, if you get if you were to invest in a 10 course lute, that really is the transition instrument. You really could play a good bit of the Wren music on a 10 course and a little bit of the early Baroque music on a 10 course. But really, ideally, you want to get more than one lute if you're in, or you just want to focus on one particular rep. And man, the Baroque music repertoire is the thing, man. So here it is. I'm just gonna break it out here. I'm trying to get the whole thing into the frame. Okay. This is a 13 course Baroque lute, built after a prototype by Hoffman. I forget Hoffman's first name, but this was made by the Dodd Lutherie in Derby, England, and the Dodds are they were my first luthiers that I worked with. I just bumped into them on Facebook, didn't know them, and they didn't know me, and we got to communicating, and I wound up commissioning a lute from them. And man, it became this whole saga. So, because I decided that I was going to get a short-term lute, I was going to get a Wren lute to get started on while I was waiting for the Baroque lute. Because I made that decision, I thought I might as well get a full-blown Baroque lute. And and I had the funds, so that's what I decided to do, and that's what this is. And if I had known at the time just how difficult it is to play the Renaissance lute, and if I'd known how exciting and how engrossing and how just magnificent Renaissance lute music is, I would have stopped with the one lute. I would have saved my money. Or I would have stopped, and the same thing, you could say the same thing with this instrument. If I'd known how amazing the Baroque repertoire is, I would have stopped with one. I would have just been a Baroque player. You know, people that are Baroque lutenists, they really prefer that repertoire. It appeals to them more, and it has a different thing. It's a different feel. Baroque music is in Baroque lute. You have arpeggios, you have ornaments, you have the kind of improvisation that is kind of comprehensible to us, that makes sense, and you have chords. Chords that make sense. You have progressions. We can call the chords in Baroque music chords. We can call the progressions. We can call the harmony. When you go back to Wren music is just it's pre theoretical. They had a theory, but that theory is extinct now. Our theory, as you know this, our music theory begins in the Baroque era. We talk about chords and progressions and keys. That's Baroque language. The Wren people, they had a different understanding. And so there's things in Wren music that just, it's like, why did he do that? I don't know, and everything in the Wren music it's more remote. The ways of ornamentation are a little bit more, it's a little bit more dicey. We don't have as much reference and as much discussion on what exactly constitutes proper ornamentation for Renaissance music. Whereas in Baroque, they actually indicated it graphically on the score. So I mean, it's quite developed. The Baroque tablature notation, French tablature used in Baroque music, Baroque lute music, is very well developed. It's fairly precise. So it's really a different thing. All that to say, I didn't know what I was getting into when I ordered this thing. I didn't know. But now I have it, and it's fate, and I have to learn it. And although most lute players are either Ren people or Baroque people, there are people that do both. And I'm going to be one of those guys. And although everybody I know of and I've heard of that does both is way past me talent-wise, I just have to make this thing work. And part of what I'm doing is really I want to write, so I may not be playing everything that I write. I may be finding players to play this stuff. And I've already found one player, and I've already roped him in and said, "Hey, you want me to write some music for you?" And he said, "Yeah." So we're already there as far as that goes. But having the instrument, I have something I can get around on and learn on and get some facility on, and I do want to play it. I absolutely want to play it. So it's incredibly exciting. You want to hear it? Here we go. Listen to this. Open D minor tuning. You probably can't tell on my crappy computer mic, but the sound of this instrument, it's much deeper. It's a half step lower than the Ren, and it's a more complex sound. Never mind the resonance. There's an enormous amount of resonance, of course. But just the instrument itself, it has a more complex sound. This is really, there's a lot going on here. New configuration of the lute in 1720. And this was a style that was particularly favored by Sylvius Leopold Weiss. And Sylvius Leopold Weiss is the undisputed master of Baroque lute composition, the greatest Baroque lute composer. Some people say the greatest lute composer of any era. He's like Bach for the lute. And in fact, he knew Bach, and he was friends with Bach. They got together. Weiss worked in Dresden, at the court in Dresden, and he made a lot of money. He was very well known. He probably was a bigger figure than Bach was at that time, and his music is fantastic. It is a extremely high quality, consistent. It's that Baroque German thing, man. I mean, it's like they didn't mess around, I mean, he wrote really great music. So about that time, prior to this, you had what was called the swan-necked lute. And this was developed from the Italian chitarrone and theorbo, these enormous long necks. And the reason for the long neck was that the technology, the strings, were such that they had to have a long neck to have the bass notes that they wanted. So it's pretty unwieldy instrument. This guy, even though it's quite large and it looks very unwieldy to us, this was a much more practical and pragmatic instrument because of the bass rider. By this point, they were able to make bass strings that were shorter, and they were able to get that to work. And I don't know all the technological details, but that's the basic idea. So 13 courses. The top 6 courses are tuned to an open D minor chord, which seems strange, but actually they wrote music in all the keys, and it worked great. The D minor open chord, open tuning doesn't actually limit you to D minor. What it does is it makes the intervals between the strings smaller, and so it's a little bit handier. You can reach more notes. And the irony is that Renaissance lute music is more thoroughgoing contrapuntal music than Baroque lute music. Baroque lute music is actually more of it. The textures move more towards 2-part, which is why you have these open strings. So these cover the open notes of the scale, And, you know, if you need to stop them, you can stop them. So you have that option too, except for the bottom two courses. But this was more the style galant with the Baroque lute. So you have a melody line up top, and then you have these big open courses down here that you can cover bass notes on. And you don't necessarily have to fret them, although you have that option. So it's more like 2-part writing or 2.5-part writing, you know. Although, I say that, Weiss wrote fugues, and other people wrote fugues, and they did write counterpoint on it on occasion. But the ironic thing is that Baroque lute music is more lyrical, and Renaissance music is actually, Renaissance lute music is actually more contrapuntal. A little bit ironic. But anyway, so let me tell you about getting this instrument. I commissioned it in January of 2022, and this was a fairly straightforward situation. You know, I got in touch with the Dodds, father and son, Lawrence Dodd and Adrian Dodd, in England, and I said, hey, yeah, so I think I've thought about it. Since I'm getting a Ren lute, I want to go ahead and get a full-blown Baroque lute. That's what I want to do. And they said, okay, that sounds good. Well, they said, well, give us about 7 months, 8 months or so. And I said, okay. So that time, we get to the point where the lute is ready. And I had already, by this point, I already had the Ren lute. I'd already gone through shipping and that whole experience with Tumiati, and which that shipping situation worked out beautifully. So I was hoping that the same thing was going to happen with this one. And when this came, there was this huge box. You could fit a person inside the box. And I opened it up, and there was this beautiful case, the Kingham case. Because, if you're going to have an instrument like this, you want to have a good case. And I opened the case up, and bam, it was broken, as you can see from the picture. And it was really, I was just heartbroken. The Dodds, particularly Lawrence, Lawrence was one of 2 or 3 people that I got in touch with that when I was getting into the lute, that were kind of he was kind of my guide. He was kind of my advisor. And I would ask him a question. I would send him an email or chat him on Facebook, and man, he would give me such a detailed reply. And it was incredible, the amount of information that he has and that he's willing to just share. Some people you talk to, and they play games, and they try to play the expert, so it's like they make you they make you wish you had never asked a question to begin with. But Lawrence was just full of information. Why the rosettes are this way, why the soundboard is this way, why the body is this way, why the neck is this way. And really, I just learned a lot, and it was fantastic information. And then he would talk about ornaments, and then he'd talk about composers, and he'd talk about the migrations of the great lute makers from 300 years ago, 500 years ago. Incredible information, and very engrossing. This is real history, and it's significant history and compelling history. So all of that, learning all that, negotiating all of the details that I wanted on the instrument, and then it gets here and it's busted. I was looking at the break, and I was thinking, it's wood. If I take it to a luthier, they're going to stick glue between those 2 pieces of wood, and then they're going to stick the 2 pieces together, and they're going to glue it, and they're going to clamp it, and then, man, it's just 2 pieces of wood that are going to be glued together. Surely I can do this myself, And I was kind of steeling myself because, the Dodds, they're so knowledgeable. They have so much knowledge and so much expertise about these instruments. They really live and breathe lutes over there. And I was kind of, I was on good terms with them. They're friendly guys, and they're very open and I really got to know them well, and I enjoyed having conversations with them. But I was kind of steeling myself. I kind of thought, I'm going to tell them that I want to do this repair myself, and they're going to like, they're going to be bothered by that. maybe they'll just say good luck, or maybe they'll try to politely talk me out of it, but they're not going to be happy. Whatever their response is not going to be happy. So I'm having this conversation with the two of them on a video chat, and I just start to steer things that way. And Adrian says, do you want to fix it yourself? Because we could help you. And I thought, yeah, I want to fix it myself. I mean, I think this is the most reasonable thing. If I ship it back to you, God knows what's going to happen to it. It's second time across the Atlantic. So yeah, I want to fix this myself, if this is at all possible. And if you want to help me do that, that would be fantastic, because I would love to have the help. And Adrian just said, we'll help you. Absolutely, we'll help you. And I had these, we did 3 or 4 video chats, and these video chats went on for hours, okay? So I would have a video chat with Adrian and Lawrence. They would be in the UK, and I'm here, and we would talk for 3 hours about lutes and glue and wood and clamps and temperature and humidity and heating up hide glue and for hours, and it was like the equivalent of a master class, a primer on lute repair. Because I had 3 or 4 of these video chats with them, and we went over everything. They drew pictures, they drew diagrams of what I should do and how I should do it, and we talked about it. And the first thing I had to do was take the strings off, which sounds like a simple thing, but there's 24 strings. And then I had to take the pegs out, and that sounds like a simple thing, but there's 24 pegs, including a treble rider peg and 4 bass rider pegs. And the thing is that each peg is individual, and it was fitted and handmade to fit exactly into one place on the peg box. And if you get that wrong, if you put the wrong peg in the wrong box, in the wrong hole in the peg box, you could have problems. So the first thing I did was, before I loosened the strings, and then I actually put tape on every peg, and I put a number, and I numbered every peg before I took it out, so that I knew where it would go. Adrian had told me this. He said, if you're trying to guess which peg goes back into which hole, he said, I've spent hours trying to do that, and it's a nightmare. And so don't do that if you can avoid doing that. So that was the first step. And then I actually built a sort of a mock-up of the peg box, and I actually did the repair on the mock-up as just kind of a dry run-through, because I'd never worked with hide glue before. I'd never really worked with wood in this way before, I didn't know what the clearances were going to be using the Dremel tool, the little saw that I used. And it was quite intense. And this was all over, this is right around the time of Christmas, right around Christmas time. Christmas breaks when I'm doing this. And so I think it was the day after Christmas, I finally just kind of bit the bullet and said, I've done the mock-up, I've done the cuts, I've made the biscuits, biscuit joinery, and I've fit them, and it's time to do this thing, and it's time to make it happen. So I did it, and Becky, God bless her, she helped me. You have to heat up the glue. The glue is it's like honey, kind of, but it's a granular thing at room temperature, and you have to add water, and then you have to heat it up, and then you have to get it the right consistency, and you've got to use it when it's hot, and you've got to heat up the wood so that the wood is warmed up when you apply the glue to it. And you don't want to get the glue on anything but where the glue goes, because if you do that, this glue, when it dries, it's like glass. It's hard, incredibly hard. It's temperature sensitive. You heat it up and it'll melt, but at room temperature, you can cut yourself on this stuff. It's incredible stuff. So I finally did it, and I didn't do it perfectly. Um, there was some mistakes that I made. Uh, we were originally talking about doing 5 or 6 biscuits, but the way I was looking at the configuration between the peg holes and the 2 supports on the bass rider, I could only find room for 3 cuts. But they did a test over there in Derby. He did a test with only a single biscuit joint, a single cut, the kind of repair we're talking about. And he put the full weight of the tension, 20 pounds of tension, on just a single joint, and it held. And he was very excited about that. He was telling me about that. So I wound up doing 3, and because I'll show you here. I'm making this video partly for them because Adrian has been asking me. He's like, "Can you show me what you actually did? Because I want to see how it turned out." Becky was right there with me, helping me with this. I couldn't have done it without her. It was very difficult to do. It's a question of getting that bass rider at the right angle. And I actually didn't get it quite up to the right angle. And Adrian said, you know, you don't have to get it perfectly in line when it's when you're done with it, because as the glue cures, it will pull it together. So keep that in mind. And I thought, oh, great, but I didn't. I should have done it a little bit more. But even if it had been perfectly in line, it wouldn't be vertical. You can see how it's at an angle. It would still be at an angle if I'd gotten it all the way, true with where it was supposed to be. But at any rate, it wasn't. It was a little bit off, and so the strings were a little bit off. But actually, the nut, which the nut on these instruments, it's loose like it is on an oud. It just comes right, when you take the strings off, it just comes right off. So I found that if I just shifted the nut slightly, I could get it. I could get the strings perfectly in line. And when you're playing it, you can't see, and when you're in front of an audience, you can't see the imperfections from the result of my repair. And when I tuned it up, it held, and it's still holding now. And actually, it feels solid. And from what Adrian has told me about lute repair and about the biscuit joint, its engineering properties, it should hold. It's actually stronger now than it was before it broke, and it should hold. Obviously, I'm not whacking it around and testing it to destruction, but it's functional. I want to show you just a few more of the details. I'm losing the light here, but here's the rosette. Just like with the Tumiati lute, it's relief carved, hand carved into the face. And I think you can see it's a different style. This one's more floral, and Lawrence really wanted to do this one. And at first I wasn't too sure, but the more I got into lutes, the more my tastes began to develop. And finally I was at the point where, Lawrence had persuaded me that he knows all there is to know about lutes, or at least enough to make a really great lute. And he knew what a Hoffman lute should, the Hoffman 13 course, he knew exactly what that should look like. And, after a month, 2 months of discussing all things lute with them, I finally realized, these guys know lutes. I'm going to let them, I'm just going to hand this off to them, and they're going to give me a great lute. And they did. The bowl is Purple Heart, which is unusual. Most lutes do not use that, but I liked the color. They had made another one this way. It has a bit of ebony between each stave, 9 staves. The face is figured. You can see better in the pictures than on the video, but the face has got some figuring in the wood, and it's just beautiful. I can't wait to get into this thing, but it's like, it's like, I'll tell you what it's like. It's like starting out as a freshman in college, and you're just going to do a double major, and you think, oh, that's easy. I'll be able to do that. I'm going to be a doctor and a lawyer. And now I have no choice. Now I have no choice. I'm totally locked into this. But fortunately, my love for lute music goes back to my childhood, and it seems to be more or less boundless. Um, and it was strong when I was first getting into this, and everything that I learn about them, I just get more and more excited about it. The ultimate thing would be to play Weiss on this instrument. And to play Weiss, to play Bach, to play Hagen, Falkenhagen. Those are my goals. You know, with the Renaissance lute, I'm really focusing on the Italians. At least in the short term, I'm focusing on Milano because he's a little bit more approachable. Eventually, after I get a lot of Italian music under my belt, eventually I'm going to start moving towards Dowland. Dowland is like, he is the high peak of Renaissance lute. He's probably the greatest Renaissance lute composer. And when I say the greatest, there were several others that were nearly as great as he was, right? And when I say Milano was the greatest of the Italians, there was Alberto da Ripa, there was a Paladin, there were several really great composers right in that same time period. So it's not like there's a couple names and the rest of them are kind of lightweight. It's not like that, man. This is an enormous thing. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible music, incredible repertoire, and it's a different way of looking at music. That's the thing I think that's most exciting to me. Just like with the oud, that's why I got into the oud. This is a different way of looking at music. This is a different aesthetic, a different conception of musicality. And you just can't help but learn from that. I'm sorry to say I cannot hardly play anything on this. I'm going to, this weekend, I'm going to try to work up something, and I may tag that on to the end of this video. So if there's something after this little bit here, that means I was able to throw something together. But this is a completely different animal than the other one. And it's this thing is going to be challenging me for the rest of my life. I'm not going to have this mastered anytime soon, but my goodness, what an exciting prospect. Anyway, the Baroque lute, the Dodd Lutherie. I recommend the Dodds. I said that I recommend Tumiati in the last video. The Dodds, not only did they give me a great lute at a good price, that is just, it's a magnificent instrument. It really is. But they went so far beyond the call of duty as far as helping me with the repair. I couldn't have done this without them. And they literally answered every question that I had. They fully answered it. And at the end of it, if I had asked for more, they would have given me more. And we're still in touch. They really become friends of mine. It's a great company. It's a great outfit. I can't recommend them enough. I like to, when I get into instruments and I'm dealing with luthiers and makers and so on, I like to just kind of find one guy and just stick with them. Somebody I really like and stick with them. Nazir Adban with the ouds, he's the only oud maker that I want to mess with, and I think he's going to be able to give me anything that I want, down the road. And that's how I wanted it to be with the lutes. But I've got two, and they're both great, and they're both really reputable, and they gave me great results. But the Dodds, they just helped me so much, and it just, as difficult as this was, it was just a pleasure to work with them. And at the end of it, I have an instrument that works, and it doesn't even look that beat up. It basically looks okay. And I didn't know whether I was going to ruin it. I didn't know whether it was going to look like Frankenstein when I was done with it. It's really okay. It was scary. Oh my gosh, it was scary. But we got through it. So anyway, that's the experience. It was a great experience. And this is kind of why I'm, this is why I'm excited about these instruments right now. I hope you'll forgive me. I don't think it's a momentary enthusiasm. I think this is this is going to be my life. This is going to be a big part of my life from here on out. But anyway, so that is the story. That is the Baroque lute story. And so over to you, and hope to see some Bach on the bass again soon. Anything else you want to send me? You never did tell me what the one tune was that you made me guess, but that's all I got, man. So have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.